Yo gamers, what's up? It's Gold Demon back with another, well, Honkai Star video. Today we're going to be going, oh my god, English. Today we're going to be going over the Prydwen tier list now that Cipher's out. Now, again, I just want to reiterate a lot of people, my stance on this. Prydwen tier list, not the best thing of all time. There's a lot of things that I disagree with their, rating system in terms of like how they use usage rates and among other things, right? Like the general placement of some characters, um, things that are just goofy, like them mentioning auto mode, despite the fact that the tier list is using manual play. I bring that up specifically because they do mention it with Cipher. Really weird stuff. So keep in mind with context, Prydwen, not perfect, but it's kind of the best thing we got out there in terms of a site for this kind of stuff and so on. And so I'm sure many people are wondering, is like, why am I starting to do Prydwen content again? Because it farms views. That simple. Yeah, so that being said, let's get into the actual like list. I do want to talk about a couple of things and Cipher in general because Cipher is a lot better than what some people may realize, and there's a lot of confusion about her. Global Certified has done a good job talking about that, and he's done a follow up video. Maybe there needs to be another follow up video. I don't know, but point is the main thing, the topic of debate is her being on par of TRIBBIE. This is absolutely true, and if you say otherwise, I don't think you know what you're talking about with the game, right? So. Cipher. With her specifically, right, they mentioned this line here. She's most likely the character that has the biggest performance difference between playing manual and autoplay. Here's the thing though. The tier list criteria is manual play. What point is there into bringing this up? Genuinely, Pride One. Like, are we so for real? Like, dude, this is just like, why? It makes no sense. Like, it's crazy because this is like the same thing as pretty much considering usage rates. It's just like there's no point. It does absolutely nothing. It is not accurate of the actual character's performance. Especially when the entire thing is considered an autoplay or sorry, manual play. This makes no sense. It's goofy. But continuing. Um they're considering changing her for specifically the pure fiction version because they have her here in pure fiction. Now this one is debatable because it's going to change massively with how buffs work and depending on the team that Cypher's in, because Cypher's performance is going to change massively depending on her teammates, especially in a mode like pure fiction. Now the thing with her specifically in pure fiction is that she's kind of better as a slot 4 instead of like a slot 2 in like an Acheron team. Now of course this will depend on your team setup, right, overall, but she can in some cases enhance certain teams like let's say Aglaia and sustainless comps to perform better in modes like pure fiction, right? So that one is going to be pretty interesting to see like how it will actually affect her ratings, whether or not they're going to consider that, because I mean like sustainless teams aren't the most popular for especially the casual audience, right? But Cipher is kind of the ideal sustainless character, considering that she is taking a portion of your damage and amplifying it further, right? While also AoE amplifying, while also can be rain SP positive to allow your other teammates to do stuff, while also lowering enemy damage output. So she's doing a lot there to help those sustainless comps, and I don't necessarily think that it's mm, strong enough per se to amplify her to that next level or give her that higher rating in a mode like pure fiction, because it's not always applicable, especially given the stage buffs and the enemies that you're fighting and so on and so on, right? So there's a lot of factors and variables to whether or not Cipher can actually perform at what you would say is T0 like rarity, or not rarity, rating. But I do think it's worth mentioning that in those comps she excels, and in some cases you could say is better than other characters within her own category, right? As they're doing as a supportive DPS, as they would put it, right? Just just worth mentioning. So if we're going back to like the main tier list, there's a lot of things that I considered and I actually predicted with Cipher happening. I did predict that Cipher would be here with TRIBBIE, right? But there's other things with this list that I do disagree with that I think they should change because of Cipher's involvement, right? So here's the image I drew up like before Cipher's release, saying my general thoughts and what she's doing. The green circles are units that she's going to affect the rating of, and the red arrows are obviously the units that should be dropped. I would say, arguably, that because of Cipher's existence, Jiaocho, Ruanmei, Pella should be dropped. And the X you see on Topaz is because Cipher basically invalidates Topaz even within her own team, right? Granted, Tobes within her own team is still good, but Cipher often and most of the time will perform better. And especially if you are talking in terms of like investment, which isn't the most thing applicable in a list based on performance, right? Like it's not really something you consider, is generally better because of how Cipher functions, right? It's just that simple. Like she's a better character. This is like an example of power creep, if you will, right? I don't agree with keeping these characters where they are. See, Zhao Cho's entire like identity, despite the fact that he does do really good damage amplification, is kind of tied behind Acheron, right? Cipher is doing similar stuff, but better for the rest of the game, right? And that's where I'm going with this, right? If we were to circle Cipher, for example, right, or if we just take a look at this general like set of characters, right, and which characters Cipher's going to work well with, it's basically everybody. All right. You can do Cipher of My Day. Yes, she lowers the damage output, which can give you a bit less stacks. But here's the thing: if you never skill, never a problem. So works well with My Day, especially given that he's blast focused. You're gonna allow him to store the damage. It's gonna be alternative to TRIBBIE that arguably performs better in certain scenarios, right? Because well, that's just how Cipher works, right? She's gonna work really well in those single target scenarios because she's gonna get multiple follow ups. She's gonna record the damage and output it even more on top. And then in other scenarios, like let's say AoE, sure, TRIBBIE can get more damage herself, right, initially, but that's not always gonna contribute to better clear times. The biggest deciding factor between TRIBBIE and Cipher, and that's kind of the like whole idea behind this video, is Dance Dance Dance, right? Can the team benefit from Dance Dance Dance? And that the reason I bring this up is because of Castorize. You can run Cipher Castorize and it's gonna be really well. However, Castorize prefers total HP for her team and Dance 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 for her team. So this is where TRIBBIE is gonna be better. That's not the case in every team though. Aglia Sustainless Cipher works really well in. Now, Herta, for one, you can run Cipher, but Herta also wants AoE procs. TRIBBIE does AoE damage, right? So she's going to get more stacks. And so in that team, and because that team wants Instant Stance, TRIBBIE's better. But at the same time, in Herta team, Cipher can be ran and help Herta inside of single target to 3 target scenarios, right? Kind of like how Anaxa does that. So you run all 3 of those characters, and now you're compounding your damage together. And Cypher's AoE buffing, right? So you're going to get the benefits of having Cipher AoE buff while storing a portion of your damage to kill the next phase, right? So it's going to work really well in a lot of scenarios. Acheron, obviously, she's up there, arguably Acheron's best teammate, given the what's probably going to happen with Silverwolf and 3.4. So that's really good. Excuse me. Inoxus is stainless. That's about it. Now break teams, you're not going to use her with break teams unless you really want to fill that last slot. She's not going to replace Ruan Mei, but if you're doing a sustainless break team, yes, you could do this here. But the thing is with break teams is that Lingsha is arguably just better because she's also going to do damage. So that one's like up for the bait, but that is worth mentioning. Boot Hill. Now with Boot Hill, you just want as many turns as possible, right? He doesn't have to run those other break characters. So you could just do a sustainless Boot Hill with like Sunday, Bronya, and then Cipher, and then do a bunch of damage, store the damage, and then you effectively have a double nuke comp, right? I haven't used this myself. I should use it and test it out, right? It's more of just some theory crafting, but it seems pretty decent, assuming you can stay alive, that is, right? Fei Xiao, best Fei Xiao teammate. Apart from, Robin, obviously. There's the whole meme where, it's free to play friendly, and then just Robin shows up. Same thing there. Yunli works well with Yunli, stores the damage, is going to be an AoE buffer, right? Very simple, right? Hell, that's really about it. Every character in the category and basically all the meta teams can run Cipher in one way. Is she best in slot? No. As I said, with the Castor's example, with the Herta example, she's not always going to be best in slot, but she's going to help out there, and in some cases be better than TRIBBIE in those certain teams. When these other characters get buffed, like Jing Liu, Blade, so on and so on, guess who's going to be a great option if TRIBBIE's on the other team? Cipher, right? She is there to be an alternative to TRIBBIE in a lot of cases, and in a few cases, like with Acheron, be even better. A lot of people, and someone brought this up to me in a live stream, a lot of people are probably just what's the word? I'm gonna phrase it like this. They're too latched on to TRIBBIE's E1 and they're inflating her actual performance at E0. Like a lot of people are conflating her E0 performance with her E1 performance, and then don't actually understand what TRIBBIE is doing in terms of a unit, in terms of amplification and whatnot, right? This happens in multiple ways, especially with like Acheron E2. I've had people constantly talk about my Acheron E2 or Acheron E2 in general, and then their own setup is like complete garbage, and they're again just conflating the performance of the E2 with E0 and are not conflating. Not in that case. In that case, they are so latched on to her E2 that they don't fully realize like how she's performing at E0. Does that make sense? Hopefully that makes sense. Um, they're mind broken by certain dupes, right? Cipher is the case where so many people are latched on the TRIBBIE, they aren't even considering the fact that there are alternatives or that this character could and is on par with her, right? It's very clear given Cipher's performance. Continuing, my whole point with before in terms of Cipher and how she should drop these characters, as I said with Jiao Cho, she's effectively taking his spot as an AoE amplifier. Jiao Cho beforehand was typically like, second, third, or sometimes even fourth best character to use there because he's a general AoE amper and he amps really high. Cipher is basically baseline, has more overall, or I wouldn't say more overall amp because Jiao Cho's is 35 and then 50 with ultimates, right? Cipher is just flat 40, right? And so Cipher works a bit better for characters that aren't fully ult based. But because Cypher's permanent, can be ran fully SP positive, and you don't have to do any like stack building shenanigans, right? And in my opinion, I would say arguably easier to build. Uh, and because of her true damage, which can ignore enemy mechanics, right? She is just a lot better in general purpose than Jiao Cho. And if Jiao Cho's rating is entirely like reliant on Acheron being here, Cipher is just kind of doing the same thing but better, right? For every comp that isn't Acheron. And so Jiao Cho, where he was in his like third, fourth best slot character, he's now like fifth, sixth, right? Because both TRIBBIE and Cipher has taken his role as being that next best option, and they've just done it better, right? So I think he should be dropped. Ruan Mei is in the same ballpark. Ruan Mei is still really, really good, but she's primarily used in break teams nowadays. And now you have Cipher, who is providing really high damage amp and a little bit of damage. Ruan Mei is doing the same thing. Really high damage amp, a little bit of damage. But in the case you don't need the extra speed from Ruan Mei, I would say Cipher is again better there, right? Especially with the SP positivity. Ruan Mei, because of the way you build her, and I would say correctly, the slow Mei build, isn't going to be as SP positive because you're not building her as fast as Cipher, who can run and get turns and contribute towards like breaking. Now, obviously, Ruan Mei does have her break effect efficiency, but I'm just saying, like for example, that in a lot of cases, I would say Cipher has taken Ruan Mei's role, given you don't need the speed. If you need the speed, of course, then that's a different argument. But kind of doing similar things. Now, if you want to argue that Ruan Mei's pseudo defensive utility and extra delay gives you better like opportunities to do damage, sure, like stuff like that. I think you could um, easily argue that Ruan Mei should stay here, but I'm just saying that Cipher, in my opinion, affects Ruan Mei's position on a lot of teams, right? Hella. Hella is being killed off. She's been completely replaced by Cipher in a lot of cases. Just saying. Okay, just saying. Uh, there's basically no advantage to running Pella anymore now. Her defense down is solid, but really the only case where Pella is like quote unquote competitively viable is in these ice teams because her E4 gives her ice res down, right? Which is going to be a very nice buff. In every other scenario, Cipher just kind of invalidates her. Then I already mentioned Topaz. Topaz, for one, has been basically completely replaced by Cipher. It's, I would say, well, it's not close. You can see there's an entire tier between them. Or, well, I guess half a tier in between them. But, like, you get what I'm saying. In all these teams where, or at least the one team where you would run Topaz, the Fei Xiao team, Cypher's just better. And so it makes sense to have Cipher above her. But I've seen a lot of people argue that at the high end, Moze is better than Topaz. Now, I don't know how true that is because I'm not the most familiar with Moze himself. But I've seen people say that March 7th is comparable to Topaz. And again, that Moze can be better than Topaz in that team. So if that's the case, shouldn't we drop Topaz? I don't know. I'm just saying, like, there's a lot of stuff there. And again, this is all because of how many like spaces Cipher is taking up, right? Or like what she's actually doing and like affecting the game, like where she's applicable. It's basically everywhere, right? Especially in those slot 4 scenarios where you need a bit more damage amplification. Really good there, right? Uh Again, stuff like her weaken debuff, right, is gonna help you get a little bit more life out of these weaker sustains, right? Because you're gonna be taking less damage and they'll be able to keep you alive. Really niche ability, but it's going to be pretty helpful for some people. It gets even better though. Because of how Cipher works, guess who's buffing her? These guys, these guys, these guys. So Cipher stores damage, and so she's going to benefit from the damage done by sustains. But she also buffs damage, and so she's going to help these sustains do even more damage, right? And so throwing Cipher on the team gives you some very big team damage, right? Fat Fuck, for example, is probably one of the best to run alongside Cipher, especially in Acheron's premium team, which is going to be, Cipher, Chao Cho, Fat Fuck, and, Acheron, right? Really good there. Now, again, the Linkshare example, as I said, not always applicable because of the way Cipher functions, or, well, I guess the lack of function in a break team is to be more accurate, but that is just worth mentioning that you can get stuff out of Linkshare. Adventuring doesn't do a lot of damage, but it is just worth mentioning. It helps in that team, right? So there's a lot of places where Cipher is benefiting synergistically with these characters. And oh, she also gives Aventurine some stacks for his shield. There's a lot of scenarios where Cipher is benefiting due to her like synergies with these other characters, like I said, with the follow-ups, or the fact that she is, recording your damage and getting you more out of some of these other characters. She is more than worthy of being in this tier, and I think she is in some cases better than TRIBBIE. But some people seemingly don't want to hear that, right? But it's pretty clear if you understand the game at a deeper level that Cipher is doing a whole lot, right? The real unfortunate thing with Cipher though is her banner placement. A lot of people want Fate, they want Finon. Um, we just had Castorize come out, right? She does not have the best banner placement for a lot of people in terms of their summons, right? It is what it is. Now there is something worth mentioning that Cipher's power, there is a pretty dramatic increase in power with her weapon specifically. Her weapon is kind of insane. It's seemingly the best in slot on Kafka. Hell, Black Swan. Obviously, her. Hell, it can work as an alternative to Jiao Cho's light cone, right? Uh, it's gonna be best in slot on Pella, Silverwolf. Like her light cone has such a big impact on hell. You can use it on Fugue. You can even run it on Acheron in some cases. It's not that good for Acheron, but it gives her a debuff, right? Uh, Gwenifin, right? With any of these characters, like Cypher's light cone is like kind of broken for an Nihility light cone. So I just think that's worth mentioning is that they're still giving her this rating even without the light cone, right? And I do think that's fair because without the light cone, yes, right, you're not getting as much debuffification, but that really only affects one team. You can still hit your speed thresholds without it. You can still get a decent debuffing light cone with pearls. It does have a team restriction, or sorry, a turn restriction for enemies, but you build Cipher really fast. So that turn restriction becomes less of a problem because she's always applying it. So yeah, Cipher is really, really good. And that's all I got to say. Don't forget to like, subscribe to me on Twitch, and let me know your thoughts in the comments below.